Okay, Layla, ready? Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's informational presentation about supported decision-making and choice for people living with serious mental illness. I'm Christopher Schneiders, Director of the Sachs Institute for Mental Health Law, Policy, and Ethics at USC Gould School of Law. Our schedule today includes several excellent speakers. We will hear from Jonathan Martinez, Senior Director of Law and Policy at the Burton Blatt Institute. Next will be Lori Hallmark, Special Project Director at Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid. After Lori's presentation, there will be a panel discussion featuring Ellen Sachs with Rachel Chambers and Tristan Scremen from Painted Brain. The panel will be moderated by Peter Blank. A few notes before we begin. The Zoom session is being recorded, so please turn off your video if you do not wish to appear. Please keep in mind that this in mind also for the Q&A portion. We hope to have 15 minutes at the end of the presentations. We also have Spanish interpretation and captioning available. For interpretation, please click on the bottom bar, the button in the bottom bar of the Zoom screen. I think it's to the right. Lastly, it would be great to know who you are, so please let us know in the chat if you feel so inclined. And now I will turn things over to Ellen Sachs, founder and faculty director of the Sachs Institute, for a brief welcome. After Ellen, we will show a short video, about 5 minutes, to begin our presentations. Ellen?
Thank you, Chris, and thank you all for being here. I'm really delighted that we're convening this meeting. I think we're going to have an interesting and important conversation. We will have people speak individually, Jonathan Martinez for 20 minutes and Lori Hallmark 20 minutes, and then there'll be that panel with Rachel Chambers, Tristan, got his last name, and me, and then Peter will be moderating. So welcome everybody, and let's get started.
Choice is important to me because so often people make decisions for me. Choice allows me to choose how I want to be helped, how I want to be served. Choice allows me to be free to make my own decisions. Choice allows me to voice what I want, what I need. Choice allows me to be free.
I am my choices, and choice is who we are. Everyone is a sum total of their choices. Choice makes us. When you deny me my choice, you deny me myself. Choice is important to me because I want to be the author of my own script, and especially when it's something as important as my own health. Too often, people say that those with disabilities should not be allowed to make their own choices.
I think the importance of choice and psychiatric advance directives is something that I think a lot of people overlook because they think like, of course, I have the power to choose. I can choose whatever I want. But sometime when your choices are questioned and someone says, you know what, this person doesn't make as good of choices as me, so this person shouldn't make any choices. This is often what happens to people in the psychiatric setting. Because they can't make some choices, they're deemed to be incapable of making all choices. And that's something that we really don't believe in.
Supported decision making is important to me because it's something that I do every day, all the time. Whether it's going out and asking a friend, hey, how do I change a tire? Going out and asking for advice on what you should do next in applying for a job process. Supported decision making is something that we do all the time without even realizing it. Too often, people with disabilities are told that they don't know or understand enough about themselves to make decisions for themselves. And this is used as an excuse to give them treatments that they don't agree with or to prescribe them medicines that they don't want to take. Supported decision-making is something that should be available to everyone regardless of disability because it gives them agency and the ability to feel like they are in control of their decisions and what they decide to do in their lives.
As a Black woman, choice is very important to me especially with psychiatric advance directives, because too often, particularly in the medical system, myself have been discounted, not believed, and questioned when I had a concern. The ability to make choices is important, particularly in my health, because I want to be able to tell people how I want to be treated. I often hear of particularly women of color saying that they're not believed. So for me, this document, Psychiatric Advance Directives, will give legal force.
So like a lot of people, I didn't know about psychiatric advance directives until very recently, and I'm upset because it's such an amazing kind of document to have for people who are going through a lot of mental stresses and strains in their life. Psychiatric advance directives gives you the ability to choose what kinds of mental treatments you would like to receive before a psychiatric emergency occurs. This gives the ability for people who oftentimes have their choices taken away from them and their right to choose stripped from them, gives them back that ability to choose and gives them more agency to live their own life.
So the role of peers in psychiatric advance directives. So, peers are so valuable to psychiatric advance directives because the power relationship is equal, and there's not one person on top of another. Psychiatric advance directives cannot be put onto peers. They need to be created for peers and by peers. And this process will make the psychiatric advance directive ours, not a treatment facility, not a doctor or anyone else. It really should belong to the peer. It should be from the peer's perspective.
In the Black community, psychiatric advance directives are almost unheard of, particularly amongst myself. I never knew about psychiatric advance directives. So this document will be a force that will allow us to advocate for how we need help and support. Too often, Black individuals are responded to in a way that's not appropriate for what we need. Psychiatric advance directives will allow the Black community to have a voice, to be able to advocate how we want to be treated with in health, law enforcement, and housing.
Thank you so much. And that was an incredible video to everyone who took part in it. Everything that you just heard in that video is everything you are going to hear for the rest of the day. The most important thing I think that you heard was about the importance of choice and how choice makes and shapes us and helps us be the people we want to be. So when I'm going to talk to you as an introduction about supported decision-making that you heard about from the video. But when we talk about supported decision-making, the first thing I want you to do is think about yourself and think about your life and think about your rights. Think about the things that are most important to you, the things that make you who you are, the things that make you proud to be an American, a Californian, a citizen, a human. What are the rights that are most important to you? Freedom of speech, elections, freedom of religion, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. What do all these have in common? They have what you heard on the video, choice. Freedom of speech is the right to choose what to say and what not to say. Elections are the right to choose who will govern us. Freedom of religion is the right to choose how, where, and whether we will worship. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is the right to choose the lives we live. So truly, we are our choices. Like the philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre said, I am my choices, because every choice you make shapes the person you are, the good ones, the bad ones, the silly ones, and significant ones. They teach us the kind of person we want to be and the kind of person we don't want to be. So if you ask me what my favorite right is, it's the right to make choices. Because without that right, none of the other rights matter. If I say to you, you have the freedom of speech, but you will only speak when I tell you to and only say what I tell you to say, that's not a right. If I tell you you have the right to live where you want, but you only have this choice, that's not a right. If I tell you you can vote for who you want to, if I take you to the polls, that's not a right. So the right to make choices is the most important one we have because they make all those other rights real. And when we exercise the right to make choices, when we are the people that are directing our lives, the phrase for that is self-determination. When you hear that, when you hear self-determination, think making choices, because that's what it is. People who are self-determined, they do things instead of having things done to them. They act instead of being acted upon. They are their causal agents. So people who are self-determined make more choices. And here's something that we know from about 40 years of science. People with disabilities who are more self-determined, who make more choices in their lives, are also more likely to be healthier, happier, more independent, more well-adjusted, and yes, healthier and safer. And yet, unfortunately, for the last 1500 years, going back to ancient Rome, in ancient Rome, the first time they wrote the laws down in one place, it was an emperor named Justinian. He got all the laws together in one place. I'm such a legal geek, I named one of my children Justin, so I know about this. They got all the rights together in one book. And the first time there were written rights in the Roman Empire was this Justinian Code. I have a copy. One of those said, if you are feeble-minded, and that was their word for people with disabilities, you had to have a curator over you to make decisions for you, to do things in your place. So the first time there was rights were taken away from people with disabilities. And that started what I believe is a culture or an expectation that when people with disabilities have any needs or any limitations, it's an expectation that they can't do things. And that has followed us all the way through history. In Great Britain in the Middle Ages, which is where we got most of our laws, people with disabilities were divided into two categories, idiots and lunatics. Those were their words. If you were an idiot or a lunatic, you had to have a committee put over you to make decisions for you in your place. In America, we've followed that pattern. We just call it conservatorship, or in some states, guardianship. Now, conservatorship, there is nothing wrong with it when it's done right, but the way conservatorship is supposed to work is if a person with disabilities or an older adult can't make some or all decisions in their lives, what the judge is supposed to do is take away those rights the person truly cannot exercise and give them to someone else called a conservator. And then that conservator is supposed to work with the person to help that person exercise his or her rights and build their abilities so that they can eventually be as independent as possible. And if that's the way conservatorship really worked, you'd have no bigger fan than me. The problem is that's not how it works. What we know, again, from decades of studies, is that the vast majority of conservatorships, in one study, over 90% of them, take away all rights from people with disabilities. In fact, as one expert group said, conservators often wind up with complete authority over the lives of vulnerable people. And that's a problem. It can be a problem, especially when people are able to exercise their rights. As I said, I have no concern, and we should have no concern about conservatorships when people truly cannot exercise their rights. But when people are, or when people are able to exercise some of their rights, but they're all taken away, that's what I call an overbroad or an undue guardianship, one that takes away rights that don't need to be taken. And that's dangerous. Because just like we know that self-determination is the key to a better quality of life for people with disabilities, we know the opposite is true. That when people lose self-determination, their lives get worse. We have study after study after study on this, that as far back as the 1970s, that when people lost their self-determination, they would feel helpless, they would feel hopeless, they would have lower self-esteem, they'd be more passive, they'd be less able to function well. And that's truly scary. Because as we sit here today in 2021, the estimated number of people under guardianship has tripled in just the last generation. It was an estimated 500,000 people in guardianship and conservatorship around the country in 1995. It is now estimated at 1.7 million people who, statistically speaking, are 90% likely to have lost all of their rights, regardless of their abilities, regardless of the help they have to exercise those rights. And if you're thinking, of course, the number of conservatorships have increased, we're getting older as a country, you're right. But the studies say that the fastest growing segment of the population going into conservatorship, young adults with disabilities, 18-year-olds. In fact, according to the National Council on Disability, if you are an 18-year-old with disabilities, you are more likely to be in a conservatorship where you've lost all your rights, probably for the rest of your life, than if you were an 85-year-old person. And the science is scary. We know that people who are in overbroad and undue conservatorships can suffer significant negative impacts on their lives. They can feel less well, do less well, function less well, and in some cases live less long. But on the other hand, decades and study after study has shown us that more self-determination, more choices leads to a better quality of life. People who make more choices, more independent, more likely to be part of their community, more likely to be employed, more likely to live on their own, socialize, date, and get married. Have you ever heard about a famous case in the US Supreme Court called the Olmstead decision? In 1999, the Supreme Court said that people with disabilities have the right to be full and equal members of their community. They have a right to participate equally in their community. And if all that meant was that people with disabilities had the right to not live in institutions, but to move to group homes where they never got out and did anything, what's the point? You become part of your community where? At work, when you're socializing, when you're with your friends, when you're dating, when you're getting married, when you're going to church, when you're doing things with people in your lives. And if we know that the thing that could be standing in between having that and not having that is making more choices, doesn't it mean we have to think about it before we jump, before we say 1,500 years of culture that says if you have any limitations, you have to lose all your rights, continue? Well, here's a possible way forward. As mentioned in the video, it's called supported decision-making. The definition of supported decision-making, the one that you'll probably find if you go to Google eventually, is on your screen right now. It's a lot of words. I wrote them. And you can read them now. You can screenshot it. It says it's a recognized alternative where people working with friends, family members, and professionals who help them understand their situations and choices they face so they can make their own decisions. Now that you've read it, I ask that you forget it. That's a lot of words. It's a lot of words that don't mean very much. If you ask me what supported decision-making really is, I'm going to ask you a question. How do you make decisions? What do you do when you go to the doctor and the doctor speaks jargon at you? If you're like me, you say, can you please explain that in plain language? What do you do when you have a difficult question in a relationship? You call a friend, don't you? I have a buddy who knows about cars and I don't. So when I get an astronomical estimate from my mechanic, I call my buddy Jeff and say, am I getting ripped off or not? My sister works in the school system. When one of my kids gets into trouble on days that end in Y, I give Jan a call and say, what should I do about this? So that is what supported decision-making is. It's getting the help you need to do the things you need to do and make the decisions you need to make. And all of us do it every day. I needed a ton of help just to join this webinar. But if you want to know about the importance of supportive cliches we have in our language about making decisions, think about all the phrases that you've heard. Don't go off half-cocked. Don't make a snap judgment. Don't rush to judgment. Get a second opinion. Consider your options. Or as my dad used to say, measure twice, cut once. They all mean the same thing. Get help. Get advice. Do the right thing. And you know what? If you're a person without disabilities, or as I call it, a temporarily able-bodied person, because we are all 1 second away from being people with disabilities. If you're one of them, and you do that, and you get help to make a decision, and you say, I need some help here, you are considered smart and wise and someone who considered their options. The problem is 1,500 years of culture have said that when people with disabilities say, I need some help, it means they can't do anything. And that's what we need to change, because supported decision-making can do the same thing for people with disabilities that it does for everyone else. People with disabilities, like everyone, may need different kinds of support, may need more intensive support. In fact, we all need different types of support. There are absolutely things that I don't do well that you do out there, that I do well and that you don't. And we all use support different ways. So support could just be someone to listen to me and give me advice. Support could be specific people who I go to for specific things. Support could be what's called a micro board or a circle of support, a group that I talk to that gives me their advice so that I can make decisions in my life. All of that is supported decision-making, because supported decision-making is just me going to you to get advice so I can understand what I have to do and the best ways to do it. And if we want to do supported decision-making, we can all leave this call being the world's biggest advocates and practitioners of supported decision-making if we make 3 commitments, and they're all easy. First one goes like this. We all agree that everyone has the right to make choices to the maximum of their ability. And that's easy because that's the Declaration of Independence. We all have inalienable rights like life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And if we agree with that, then we agree that I can get help from you. I can say to you, can you give me a hand here, Ellen? Can you explain something to me? Can you help me understand it? Without you saying, oh, you don't know, so you must never be able to know. So you must never have the right to do that again. And that's easy because we all get advice every single day from people we trust. And the last one's the easiest yet. The first thing you do may not work, but there are as many ways to give and get help people as there are people. Try again. You may have to go to plan B. You may have to go to plan C, D, E, or Q. But there's always another tool in the box to empower people, to try to give them the ability to make decisions. And there are resources out there that can help you. In fact, if you Google supported decision-making, you'll find some. Remember, there is no one way to do this. There is no magic app. There is no magic book. And I say that as someone who's written a book. But there are ways that we can work with people to empower them to understand their choices and them to make decisions. You can Google, when do I want support? You'll find a great guided conversation tool from the ACLU. You can Google setting the wheels in motion, supported decision-making, and you can hear the story of a California advocate and how she has worked with members of her family and the worksheets they've used. You can just try to think for yourself. Where do I want help? What kind of help do I want? Who do I want to help me and when? And if we do that, we can do amazing things because the research that's been going on shows that supported decision-making can help. We know from studies that there have been studies that show that when people with mental illness are in crisis, they do better when they have assistance from supporters they trust. We know that supported decision-making and support making decisions can enhance people's ability to understand their choices, to give consent when they weren't able to before, and to improve their outcomes. And the study that I was proud to be a part of, just came out, where we worked with young adults with disabilities for over a year, helped them use supported decision-making, and then just saw how they did. We did interviews with them, with people in their lives, with their family members, with their supporters. What we found is that those people who used supported decision-making, instead of having people make decisions for them, they were more independent, more self-confident. They were better at making decisions. They made better decisions. And even in the middle of a pandemic, they had a better quality of life. They did more things. So if we make those commitments, amazing things can happen. These are all people who had been in conservatorships, who used supported decision-making to win their rights back, to work with people in their family. In this case, this family, the person in the middle was in conservatorship for 15 years. His family wanted to support him. They stopped being his conservators. They became his supporters. This young woman was living in a car because her conservator was absent and she didn't have the legal right to sign a lease. Now she works with a supporter who helps her gain access to the supports and services she needs, and she's in a job training program. Today, 8 years after I was honored enough and lucky enough to represent a young woman named Jenny Hatch in the first case, the first trial where a person with disabilities won her rights to use supported decision-making instead of being a conservatorship. Today, 13 different states have laws recognizing supported decision-making. There are projects coast to coast, California to Maine, on supported decision-making. There is the National Resource Center for Supported Decision-Making where you can learn all about it. www.supporteddecisionmaking.org. And if we do those things, if we make these commitments, if we say to ourselves, this is worth a try, that 1,500 years of assumptions that people can't do things are enough, we can change the world. I know it sounds like a cliche, but we can, because the world changes one person at a time, one person making decisions, one person being empowered. And every time someone makes it work, it's going to be easier for the next person. And that's the key. Each person giving and getting the support they need to make their own decisions and lead their best lives. It could be you. It could be somebody you support. It could be someone you believe in. It could be someone in your family who takes the step to say, I'm not going to be the same as the ancient Romans. I'm going to be the person who empowers rather than taking away. And I'm going to build self-determination because that's the key to quality of life. And isn't that what we want for our loved ones? We all want them to be as happy, safe, and independent as possible. And that's what self-determination and supported decision-making can do. I would be honored to work with you on this. My email address is on your screen now. Please feel free to reach out at any time, and it's been my honor to speak with you.
Okay, so y'all can see my screen? If someone doesn't mind just confirming that that's true?
Yes.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you. All right, so I am fortunate enough to be able to talk about my most favorite topic of all time, which is psychiatric advance directive. So I appreciate y'all giving me the opportunity to do so. Okay, so what are PADs? What are psychiatric advance directives? Well, they are a legal document, a self-determination-based legal document. They are an individual's choices in document form. So how cool is that, right? So it's my choices in document form, which means that it's me as an individual in document form in a legal document. And just like any other advance preparation document, that's what it is. It's like, you know, if you were going to make a medical advance directive or a will or a power of attorney, any of those documents that you can make that's preparing for the future, this is exactly the same thing. It's just on a different topic. The psychiatric advance directive can contain many different section options. So it can be more substantive or less substantive depending on the number of sections and the different sections that people choose to put in it. So I always say, think of it like a menu or a buffet, and one of the best ones, because you really can't go wrong with any of the sections, or I don't think that you can. So we think about the potential issues that the psychiatric advance directive has the ability to address. And these are just a few of them. So medication and treatments, obviously, what helps and what makes things worse. So my ability to explain what can help and what can make things worse provides critical information in a number of areas. So identifying supporters and agents, just what Jonathan was just talking about with supported decision-making. So the ability to identify the people that I look to help me, as well as the ability to identify agents. So for example, if a doctor decides that I'm not able currently to make decisions for myself, someone who could come in and make those decisions for me, implement my PAD, and then when I'm able to make the decisions again, their power would be removed. So emergency intervention, law enforcement and crisis personnel, that's a really critical one. Practical matters, just like any other advanced planning document, it really need to get into those practical components. Physical medical conditions, and then there are additional section options. But at the very end of the day, PADs equal choice. It's all they are. It's my choices in a legal document, an expression of my choices and who I am in a legal document. Okay, so how does supported decision-making fit into PADs? Why are PADs and how are PADs a component of supported decision-making? Well, first, in creating the PAD. So supported decision-making is used in the creation of the PAD. And here's where it's really important to understand what is the essence of supported decision making, because it's the same thing that's the essence of a PAD, which is self-determination. They have to be my choices. If they're not my choices, then the document that's supposed to reflect my choices doesn't reflect my choices. So it's not really my PAD. So it's very important that I am able to really express my decisions inside the document, and they're not someone else's decisions. And this is why, as Tristan mentioned in the video that we played at the beginning, it's really important that in the creation of the document, that the supported decision making that's used in the problem solving and creating the PAD is on an equal basis. So this is why peers are so great. It's very important that the person who is assisting to create the PAD, that individual and the person who will own the PAD, that they're equals. So there cannot be a power disparity or even the perception of a power disparity, because otherwise I may not feel able to really express my actual choices. And again, the PAD is an expression of my choices. And to the extent that it's not an expression of my choices, it's not going to work. It loses its power. And I think the most beautiful part of a PAD is that it really is a reflection of the individual. And so often, unfortunately, I think that people end up being unintentionally viewed as a collection of symptoms or a collection of one crisis after another. And so to the extent that a PAD is the expression of the person's choices, it is an expression of that individual. And how beautiful is that? It is a legal document that is an expression of each individual who owns their own PAD. So applying the PAD, supported decision making is important in applying the PAD as well. Again, the PAD has to be based on self-determination. It has to be my own choices. That's the way that it reflects who I am. That's what gives it its power and its beauty. So applying the PAD. One of the really cool things about a PAD is that not only is it created using supported decision-making, but in application, it is itself supported decision-making. So if I am really putting my choices into a legal document when I'm well, this gives me the ability to support myself when I'm unwell. So it's not just a way of using supported decision-making and problem solving to create the PAD, but it is itself in application supported decision-making because I have in advance made choices for myself, which is just really, really cool. And that's how it gives me the voice. That's how it gives me my voice in a situation where I may not otherwise have the ability to make decisions or express what my decisions are. This is where I can maintain control in a situation where things tend to be out of control. It's a critical component of recovery. As we know, serious mental illness is not static. And so preparing in advance, just like with any other preparation document, obviously, these are not things that we want to happen. Nobody wants to have a crisis occur, but you know what? It can happen. So it's a good idea to go ahead and make those advanced planning documents an incredibly responsible thing to do. And it's a component of recovery. And it's a way to maintain my control, again, as part of my recovery, even in a time of crisis, or even when I may have a more difficult time expressing myself. And also, just to repeat, at its essence, the PAD is an expression of who I am as an individual. It is my choices in a legal document that is letting y'all know this is who I am, even when I can't speak for myself. And I think that that's so important, that we are able to see and know the human being, even during a time of crisis, as an individual, as the people who love that person see them, as an entire whole human. Okay, so why? Well, again, it's all about the individual's expression. It's the expression of who I am. It's me and my choices so that you can see them when you may otherwise be bombarded with distractions from, say, a mental health crisis. And again, it's a component of recovery. It's a way to be able to take responsibility and to make choices in advance. For safety, this is really critical, right? Because what if I'm on some type of medication that will interfere with another kind of medication, and nobody knows what I'm on? So this can cause a lot of problems. If I'm on one med and I'm put into a hospital and I'm put on another med and they don't know what I'm on, this is a way to be able to provide the providers with that critical information so that we don't have things like, drug interactions. Safety, we're going to get into law enforcement. So this is a way to keep folks safe when there are engagements with law enforcement. Obviously, we hope to not have those engagements, but to the extent that they do happen, we want to protect people. Coordination of care. Y'all know what I'm talking about. It does not exist for many reasons. It's no one's fault. It's just the way that it is with the systems right now, but it doesn't have to be. A PAD can travel with the person through the different parts of the system. So if I'm in a hospital and I come out and I go into the community behavioral health system, or I go into jail, or I come out, everybody can be on the literal same page. It eliminates, it's a mechanism to create that coordination that we all seek that seems to elude us. It really can help with relationships with people, with their providers, relationships with family members and loved ones. And it's a way to identify additional services that may need to be provided, as well as once I've made my PAD and I have been able to put my choices into this legal document, now I may want to ask for more help, because that is so empowering. Me having the power to be able to put my choices into a legal document, suddenly that changes the dynamic that I have with the system. So I may be willing to engage it for other things. Okay, section options, again, not exhaustive. Psychoactive medication, we know what this one is. This is all about what meds work for me, what meds don't work for me. What am I on right now? So y'all know what can happen if let's say somebody has been on the same meds for 20 years, something happens, they go into one part of the system and now they're suddenly off their meds that they want to be on, that has worked for a long time. So this is a way, again, just to have that fluidity. And it's really important to be able to say, hey, this is what works for me and this is what doesn't work and this is why. There are other things that I use to assist me in my wellness. It's really important that you understand that I love to play the guitar. I had a client who he said he played the guitar, but I just kind of assumed it was he did some strumming and some couple of intros to some famous songs. He could actually play, and that was one of the things that was really important. And enabled me to see him in a more comprehensive way. And it was an important component of his treatment. Considerations when considering, how many times do we have, the situation where, hey, these are important things in my life. These are the things that matter to me. These are the choices that I've made that give my life meaning. And so I don't want any kind of intervention that's going to prevent me from having these meaningful things in my life. That's very important. And that information, think about the importance of that information. Suddenly, if I'm a provider and I have this information, when I'm discussing options with my patient or with my client, I know it's important to them. And so not only can I figure out how can we not interfere with that, but also how can we maximize your ability to enjoy and access that part of your life. Preferences for emergency treatment. This is a situation, it could be inside of a jail, it could be inside of a hospital where things have escalated to the point that there is an emergency intervention. Of course, this is something that everybody wants to avoid. This is bad for everybody, right? Nobody is benefited by the situation. So this is where we have the opportunity, again, as an individual, I get to express what will actually help. I can provide the providers, I can provide everyone who reads my PAD with the information that they need to help me when I'm starting to, when things are starting to go awry. This is how I can tell you that, I love watching YouTube videos of cats, or I really would like to be able to take a walk. Or I had a client who said, hey, can you give me a leaf? And that's a whole different story. But The things that can help someone to not feel so stressed and to de-escalate, they're very individualized. So again, being able to discuss and express the choices, look what that can do inside of the pad. It has, my choices have the power to reduce emergency interventions that are bad for everybody concerned. Here's the information for law enforcement and crisis personnel. So this is where we have the ability to let law enforcement know, you know what, these are the things that are going to help, and these are the things that can make things worse. Now, crisis intervention teams are fabulous, and there is a substantial amount of generalized information and knowledge and approaches that are incredibly beneficial. But this, the pad, gives the additional ability to provide individualized information about what can help and what can make things worse in that critical component of an engagement with law enforcement. And again, it is truly individualized. It is really amazing the different types of things that people identify that will send them in one direction or the other. It's the tiniest little detail. And that's what the human being is, right? These are all of my, even my minuscule decisions that have such a gigantic power. Critical physical medical conditions. There are so many just co-occurring medical conditions with this population. And so it's really important that everybody knows what those medical conditions are. If I have diabetes and I go into a hospital and they don't know it, now we have more than one problem. You know, it's just like we want someone to be able to have access to the psychiatric care that they want. We also want people to be able to have access to the physical medical care that they want and need. Practical matters. So yeah, if I go into a mental health crisis and I'm suddenly away from my life for a couple of weeks, there's all kinds of stuff in my life that need to be addressed. And so what we don't want is we don't want for people to go into a crisis and they've been removed from their life for, you know, a couple of weeks or however long. And now they come out of their being separated from their life. And not only have they been in a mental health crisis, but now everything else is falling apart because these things weren't prepared for. And this is where it's just so valuable that we can work with the person and find out who's going to pay my bills, who's going to take care of my cat, who's going to take care of my plants. How is that going to happen? We need to arrange for that in advance. What about my finances? Can I set it up so that if certain things occur, if certain objective criteria occur, maybe somebody else gets the ability to help with my finances temporarily. What if I have a job? I need to make preparations in advance so that perhaps I can access family medical leave so that I will not have these problems when I come out of that. My life hasn't fallen apart just because I've had a mental health crisis. Some people, education as well. We don't want people ending up flunking out of school. There's student loans issues. That's really important with veterans so that they don't lose their ability to access that financial assistance. People who are on probation, if they have a criminal defense attorney, this is really important. So many people are on probation. The last thing, again, that you want is to go into a mental health crisis and now everything else is falling apart. And by the way, the court is unhappy with me because I haven't shown up for probation in 3 weeks. Additional sections that we include: identifying supporters. So this is the way that the person who owns the pad has the power to choose the people that they want to help them to obtain information, understand their options, and communicate their decisions for different things. This is the chance to be able to do that. And it's also the chance to be able to, again, designate an agent. So I create a psychiatric advance directive. Let's say I also have identified an agent for somebody I want to be able to make medical decisions for me if a doctor decides that I cannot. So I've identified them. Now, if a doctor decides that I've lost my ability to make medical decisions, I'm not able to make them right now, my agent can make sure that the wishes that I have expressed in my pad are followed. Notification. This one's really important. So y'all know what happens if somebody goes into a hospital on, let's just say, an emergency detention order. They're in crisis, they're taken into a hospital, now nobody knows where they are. And so that person may not have access to a telephone, they may be unable to make a phone call. And so this is where you have loved ones who are calling hospitals to try to figure out where is my human being, where is my loved one? And the hospital's not able to say, yes, they're here. we provide the ability to waive HIPAA for the purpose of notification only. So yes, I would like for you to tell my mother, my sister, my friend, my supporter at the clubhouse where I am, not give any other information, but tell them where I am so somebody knows that I'm here. Veteran status is really important. Sometimes hospital preferences can be respected. Sometimes they can. It just depends. But there is the ability to be able to put in hospital preferences to the extent that that can be implemented. So we have some additional sections. And again, these are not exhaustive. Effective communication. This is where the person is able to put in their pad about, let me tell you how you can most effectively communicate with me. It's really important that I am not in a small room with my back to the door. It is very important that you communicate with me in the morning. It is very important that I am not in a room crowded with people. So this is how the human being, again, and just expressing their individual choices and expressing themselves as an individual can enable everybody else to understand how to engage so that that communication can be maximized. It can be a manifestation toolkit. So this is the way that my challenges can be manifested. Here are the things that can help. Here are the things that can make things worse. It's very rapish. Trauma triggers, again, critical to the extent that we can put those in the pad. And those are so individualized, as individual as the human being, right? This is an expression of that human being, such an essential expression of who we are is in our pad. The pad also has the ability to help to identify accommodations for housing and education and employment. And also there are opportunities with criminal justice sections to help somebody to be able to succeed in probation or succeed in jail diversion instead of having and build in those safety nets. So that is what I have, and y'all are welcome to reach out to me too. And I appreciate you listening and allowing me to speak on my favorite subject. So I will stop sharing my screen now.
I think I'm up next. We'll take a breath after that amazing comment. Chris and everybody, can you hear me and see me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can. Ellen, hopefully we can get Ellen to unmute herself.
Great.
And
so my name's Peter Blank, and I have the privilege of working closely with Ellen and the Sachs Institute and Painted Brain to take a step back from the so crucial personal experience you just heard and the values of self-determination, and to work with states and agencies and other entities to study and look at the extent to which supported decision-making and PADS now are effective in practice. How do they increase quality of life, save lives? How may they save costs for counties and other entities? Because money is spent on the person, not on large systems or other sorts of mechanisms which seek to control individuals. So without further ado, my job is simply to introduce and set up this panel. And I have one or two questions for the panelists. Ellen Sachs, who was introduced, Rachelle Chambers from Painted Brain, and Tristan, who you've already met, I think, from Painted Brain. And I would suggest to you that this is an extraordinary group of individuals who are pioneers in many ways, leading the way towards a new sense of self-determination for people with psychiatric and other disabilities, and have the courage really to speak about the values associated with what we're talking about today. And I guess I'll start with Rachelle, if that's okay. Ellen, in terms of seniority, I'll go to you last, but Rachelle,
Sounds good.
simply put, what did you hear today? What did you really hear that was exciting to you, or not the same old way of doing business?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to be on this panel. And what I heard today was choice, freedom, the ability to empower the individual to make informed choices, to hear the consumer, to hear their need as opposed to the need being put on them. I felt very empowered as a consumer, especially with someone that identifies as a peer that now has been working on my psychiatric advance directive. It empowers me, this presentation by Jonathan and Lori, to empower other peers to be able to make their own choices in their health. And as I said in the video, it can expand past just the health, right? Housings, jobs, right? How you want to be treated by law enforcement. So yes, I felt very empowered as a peer. I also heard opportunities to expand our peer workforce. If we allow peers to do this work and work in partnership with lawyers, with research institutions, and with universities and other practicing individuals, that we can make this document enforceable throughout our great state and the nation. So thank you. I'm thankful to be on this panel.
Thanks, Rachel. Really well said. Tristan, same question to you. What did you hear today, and how would you reflect it back, the importance of what we heard, to our listeners?
Thank you for letting me be on this panel and for this great opportunity. I heard a lot of the similar things Rachel heard, the importance of choice, the importance that the document really has to belong to the person making the document, not a treatment facility or a doctor. It really has to belong to the peer. And you know, I think there was a really good case made for the power dynamic to be equal, to there be not even a potential for misinterpreting the power dynamic. Also, I think there's a lot of things to be said for choice and supported decision making, right? Like, just because I can't make every decision doesn't mean I shouldn't be able to make all decisions I can make. You know, if I can make some decisions, I should be allowed to make those decisions. And there was a lot of discussion about how, you know, able-bodied people, or what they call temporarily able-bodied people, use supported decision-making all the time. The whole population does this. This is not something most people don't even think about. They just do it all the time. And for people with disabilities, we should be able to just do what everyone else does, and we shouldn't be, you know, discriminated against because of our disabilities. We should be allowed. And people in the psychiatric setting sometimes need these documents for all kinds of reasons, for going from one system of care to another, for you know, making their decisions known. This sort of it's made in preparation of a psychiatric emergency, so it's a good thing to plan. You know, we plan for all kinds of things. Why shouldn't we plan for when we're in crisis in a psychiatric disability? You know, all of these reasons. I think that you know, PADs are very important. They could change the entire game plan, and these are the kinds of things that I was hearing today. And I agree 100% that PADs can be these transformational documents, especially if they're created in the way that Lori and Jonathan sort of outlined. And you know, Ellen Sachs, I mean, incredible person, such a great advocate, and Ellen has spoken about this for years. The importance of PADs, the need for peers to be in control of their PADs. I'm just amazed to be part of this team, and hopefully we can move forward. That's
well said. Well said, Tristan. Thank you. And of course, Ellen Sachs doesn't need too much of an introduction. Ellen was living and writing about support and self-determination and choice a whole generation ago. Not saying that she's that old, but a whole generation ago, and wrote about this in her seminal book, The Center Cannot Hold, which I reference to any one of you, which is an extraordinary read, still relevant today. Ellen, what sort of things did you hear today, and what do you think? Where does this lead us?
Okay, I mean, it's a really good question. I think the conversation has been really interesting and full and compelling. And you know, I think that it's a really good project that we're working on. What I heard, well, I heard that I heard a lot about what PADs and SDM look like. They're from Lori, their nature, the way they help. For example, in the emergency context, Lori spins out all the different ways that they help. And so it should be able to decrease, emergencies where there's injuries and those kinds of things. She also points out, which I think is important, that this is a legal document empowering people. And that PAD is an expression of what an individual is as an individual. And Jonathan also talks about the importance of choices and PAD's expressing who I am as an individual. I think that's so important.
Yeah.
So the notion of choice, and there's the notion of agency or personal efficacy and those kinds of things. And I think both of those are
Excellent. Excellent, Ellen. Ellen, may I ask you, why are we still talking about this today when you wrote about this and others have written about this so many years ago? What is it about this topic that still remains unresolved?
It's a really good question. I think there's a huge amount of stigma about mental health disorders, and that, people in the community just think that we can't take care of ourselves. We can't make good judgments. We're dangerous and we're unable to take care of ourselves. And of course, that's not true. I mean, as you know, people with mental health challenges are much likelier to be injured than to injure anybody else, and that kind of thing. And then stigma is like a huge piece of what's going on. I mean, I think there are all sorts of reasons why we have stigma and things that we can do about it. But one of the things that's most striking to me is self-stigma. So Glenn Close, the actress, did a public service announcement with people walking around Grand Central Station with a shirt that says schizophrenia, sister of bipolar, or whatever. And she gave me a shirt that said schizophrenia. And my first thought is, I don't wear t-shirts to work during the week, but I do wear them on weekends. And then I thought, do I really want to advertise that I have schizophrenia? And then I thought, I've also had cancer, and people wear armbands and pins and t-shirts in solidarity, without shame and with pride. And that's the way it should be with mental health challenges as well, but we are just not there yet. I actually think there's a little bit of movement among our students in terms of what they're willing to talk about and self-disclose, but it's all very anecdotal, of course.
That's fantastic, Ellen. Thank you. We'll, of course, learn more from you as this project moves forward. Continuing in reverse, Tristan, what's the project ahead? What are some of the tangible steps that, for example, your amazing organization with Rochelle and others, Eli, Painted Brain, is playing a crucial role in this in California. What are some of your hopes for next tangible steps? What do you think Painted Brain can be doing to further this dialogue? And of course, I'll ask Rachel that as well.
Well, we want to continue working with this team and any other team to sort of, part of our role has been to get on social media, to promote this idea, to have almost like a media slash, storytelling about this. So we hope to do more storytelling about what PADS are, what the best way to use PADS should be. Maybe some more engagement online about ways that PADS can be used, supported decision making. What does it really mean? We had some very good tutelage, of course, from Ellen over the years, and also from Jonathan and Lori more recently. And we're trying to use those understandings to sort of create this groundswell from below, right? Like from the people, saying, we want these documents. We want these documents to be for and about us. And we want people to use these documents. I think Ellen brought it up several times that I think she went in for some kind of medical treatment, and she says, I have a medical directive, and there was nothing else was stated. Like, where is it? How do we implement it? It's happened to me too. I've gone into the doctor. When I went to see my doctor, I told him that I have both an advance directive and a medical directive, and then that was it. There was no, how do these things get implemented? That's a whole nother question. That kind of storytelling, that's the kind of stuff Painted Brain wants to really be a part of.
That's fantastic, Tristan. And as my friend and colleague Jonathan Martinez also points out to me always, there are many ways to have choice and self-determination fostered, not necessarily only by a legal document. It could be through a spreadsheet you show, or a diagram, or through peers. And so there's not only just one way to reflect this sense of self-determination. Rochelle, it's been amazing to know you. I've only known you a short period of time, but I'm so impressed with what Painted Brain is doing. When I always speak to you, you always have an agenda that's so exciting and say, here's what we're going to do next, Peter. Tell us what we're going to do next here.
I appreciate you. Yes. And I wanted to start off by saying Painted Brains in this to make good trouble. We're an advocacy organization, but we're a coalition builder of peers. So our role in this project and overall is to provide a voice for peers and to coalition build, to bring everyone along, to bring peers to the table first and foremost, because we're the users and consumers. We show that recovery is possible. And then we want to bring doctors, lawyers, and everyone, practitioners to the table. And we want to bring everyone to the table to get this enforceable, and to advocate for all of our rights, particularly around these advanced directives. But yeah, Painted Brain, like Tristan said, we're here to tell the story, to coalition build, to implement. We provide direct services as well. So we want to see this expanded with SB 803 and the implementation of the peer specialists. How can peers play a role in a niche job skill set? So a lot of opportunities and a lot of advocacy. You'll see me out there in Tristan talking to partners and making good trouble, making friends. But that's what Painted Brain's here to do.
I like it. You referenced an SB bill.
SB 803.
Tell our listeners what that is, please.
Yes. So our governor recently signed the SB 803, which is the peer certification bill, which expands our workforce and allows peers to be able to bill and provide our services in Medi-Cal. It's a Medi-Cal expansion. So I'm actually honored to be on the client and family committee for the OAC, to be able to advocate for peers and ensuring that it's implemented in a way that's reflective of our recovery practices. So yes, by next year, hopefully our state will be implementing the expansion of our peer workforce. And these particular conversations are necessary because peers will lead this in partnership, hopefully with lawyers. So if we get peers learning this now and implementing this, we'll be at the table. We won't just be like behind, in facilities. We can be at the courts. We can be in the jails. We can be everywhere. We can meet people where they are. So I'm really excited to be a part of the implementation of the great bill that's being implemented in our state, but also to see its partnership as well.
That's fantastic. And it's quite a nice segue back for one more round of questions. And I'll ask Chris if we are taking questions from the audience. But Ellen, of course, the Sachs Institute, quite amazing legacy project you've developed. We've heard today that the way you make choices and have choices is by having choices and making choices, making decisions. And at the Sachs Institute, you, of course, are mentoring a whole next generation. You've done so for years, of young adults with psychiatric and other disabilities. You've created mentorship programs with businesses. You run symposia and lectures. Say a little bit about, I think the folks listening deserve to hear a little bit about the Sachs Institute and what you hope to continue to do in this regard.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Peter. I guess it was about 10 years ago, I set up the Sachs Institute for Mental Health Law Policy and Ethics, and we pick we invite students to write something, say why they'd like to be involved, and then we pick 8 to 10 students or 5 to 10 students from the law school and some from other departments like occupational therapy and psychology and psychiatry and that kind of thing. We took a different topic. So our first year was mechanical restraints. Then we did psychotropic meds in the law. And we did criminalization of mental illness, and 4 or 5 other different topics. And what we do is, again, we recruit students to write in these areas. And we're very gratified that they want to do it, and they also usually do a really good job. And I've also, was going to say.
And you've certainly also had mentorship programs as well with companies.
Yes. So there was a group called Pearson, which is an academic publishing company, wanted to set up a mentorship program with people with mental health challenges, hooking up with people in their organization. They wouldn't be doing therapy or anything like that, but they would be doing education and support. When you do your interview, here's what you should think about talking about, and here's what you shouldn't talk about, and those kinds of things to sort of empower young people to kind of take charge of their lives and move forward. So that's been very gratifying.
Yeah. Great work at the Sachs Institute. Tristan, final words for our listeners about where you hope we go from here. This California endeavor is catching fire, hopefully, and can proceed across the United States. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I hope that it really does, like you say, catch fire, and also that PADS are really used as self-determination documents, as really from peers, by peers, about peers, and I hope that I mean, they've been around for a long time, and many people, including Ellen, has done this groundbreaking work of really creating the space we're in right now, really, and so. We take that baton and keep going. That these documents do become widely used, implemented, and that people really understand how they work and how they should be built.
Can I make one other comment? Which
of course.
Is, nobody really understands as well as a fellow sufferer or experiencer, whether it be in the mental health context, or I have had that experience in the cancer context. So the use of peers is incredibly important, I think. I think it both helps the peer who's giving the support, and it helps the peer who's getting the support. And I think people feel more connected when they talk to other people who have some experience. And it could also be an experience with a loved one or whatever, just some sense that the person understands.
Excellent, Ellen. Thank you. Rochelle, you mentioned this earlier, but obviously we're living in a time of terrific inequality, where the country is sitting on its edge of its chair waiting for a verdict in Minnesota today. Disability is associated with, unfortunately, poverty, homelessness, touches with the criminal justice system. How is this so important as part of the larger efforts you and Painted Brain are making towards equality? You mentioned, as a Black woman, your experiences. Why is this transcend what we're talking about today and go to these important themes that we're all dealing with today as a country?
Yeah, for me, thank you for allowing the space right now, because right now it is the country. We need healing. We need to come together. And I believe Painted Brain is one of those voices that promotes empowerment and education and hope. I see this as an advocate, as a way to empower particularly all communities of color, not just the Black community, but all communities, on ways to be empowered to plan. When you get a pad or a document like this, it helps with you and your planning. So for me, I'll just tell you a quick story. When I told an African-American mother about this psychiatric advance directive, that I was doing this work, she had disclosed to me, she's like, Rachel, I didn't want to tell you this, but I literally stood in front of the police a couple of weeks ago with my son, who was having a psychiatric break. And I had to tell them, like, no, he's not violent. He's crazy. Not crazy, but right. He's having a breakdown. She didn't know what to say. And she said at that moment, she's like, Rachel, I literally risked my whole life. I risked everything. And so when I told her about and I get kind of emotional, but when I tell, and this is the stories that a lot of Black mothers, and I have a Black young boy that's 3. And when I told her about this psychiatric advance directive, and she told her son, who's about 30, and he was really excited. And he was like, I want to learn more. This is a Black man saying, I want to learn more about this. I want, to be able to tell them that I'm, when I need help. So for me, I see this like as really as a document, as a voice for our community, another way that we can be empowered, that we can speak to law enforcement, we can speak to doctors, that we can show that we can make decisions for ourselves. Our voices matter, we matter. And so I really appreciate this space, Peter. I also will be working on the national level with the Copeland Center to organize peers across the whole United States who are working on psychiatric advance directives. So look out more for that. So yes, Painted Brain, this is a coalition building. This is a tool for us to continue to educate, to empower, to bring people together. So thank you. I really appreciate the space.
Thank you, Rochelle. And of course, the flip side of the coin is, as people become more empowered and police, social service, doctors, whoever interact with people as they become more empowered, the norms change for those individuals to expect empowerment, to listen and expect choice. So this is really a paradigm shift begun by so many pioneers like Ellen Sachs years ago and carried forward by you amazing folks today. I think we've had a great discussion among ourselves here on this panel, and I would turn it now to Chris to see if there are any other activities that we want to discuss. Perhaps if we have time, give a final word to Jonathan Martinez and or Lori, or take questions from the audience, Chris.
Yes, we'd love to open it up for questions. If you want to raise your hand in a participant window, if you just want to unmute yourself and ask a question, I do have one from the chat that can hopefully start us off. We'd love to hear from anyone who wants to participate. I think, Lori, this might be a good one for you initially, from Jonathan Halverstadt. Says, it's been years since I Googled for a PAD, and the last time I looked and found PAD forms, I found them to be quite overwhelming and complicated. Are there any PAD forms that are easier to understand and easier to fill out than what I found a decade ago? And we might talk about what the plan is in California. So Lori?
So yes, there are. I have also Googled PADs and found all of the different templates that are confusing and long and confusing. So what I will say is one of the very first challenges and exciting developments is that we are going to work with stakeholders to create an agreed upon template for the state of California. So there's that. And that will include the menu, right? The buffet of different section options. But here is where it's critically important that you ask this question. The way that we do this work to create, this is Olmstead. I can't do anything about him. He loves being on Zoom. So the way that we work with our clients and the way that the PAD is created and the way that really maximizes its ability to be of value is to work with another person to do that problem solving, what we just talked about with the peers. So when we work with our clients, they don't ever touch a document until they're reviewing it at the end, until they're signing it. So all we're doing is having a conversation about these different issues, and then we're putting it into a usable PAD form so that you eliminate all that, oh my gosh, now I have a bunch of pieces of paper in front of me and it's all this legal stuff. So the answer is twofold. Number one, there's going to be a template for the state of California so that there will be a consistent template. And number two, this is where we have the opportunity when we're doing training for assisting someone to help create a PAD, we remove those barriers because those barriers don't have to be there. Hope that answered the question.
Thank you, Lori. Does anybody else have any questions? Feel free to unmute yourself or raise your hand or put something in the chat. Right now, I don't see anyone.
Chris, if I may, as a professional moderator, what did you hear today? What did you find exciting? Because you're intimately involved as the director of the Sachs Institute. You're involved in many projects. Maybe say, if we don't have questions, say a word about some of those activities.
Okay, I'll go into the next question from Jonathan Halverstadt.
Okay.
I
Never mind.
yeah, I like to let this wonderful presentations kind of sit, and I'm looking forward to all of the work that we're all doing together, as well as working with the counties. And just great to see so much interest, involvement, looking forward to collaborating with stakeholders, the work that uh, Kieran and Sahota and Lori are doing. Just really exciting and glad to have the support of mental health services. So Jonathan asks, how far away are we from California for having a standardized form? And then perhaps Karis Holman wants to ask a question as well.
I'd be happy to answer that question. My name is Kieran Sahota, and I'm a project manager for the Mental Health Services Act Innovations project that multi-counties are working on for PADS. And so we currently have 5 counties involved in wanting to move PADS forward in California. And part of that aspect is the standardization of our forms and the standardized training. And we are looking at starting the project in July and spending a good solid 6 months and really working with our stakeholders to determine what's the best form to use. There's multiple PADS, as Lori just explained. And so not wanting to rush through the process, but actually to have a solid format. So I would say within the next year, we would have all the stakeholder input, create a document. And as Lori said too, it is overwhelming without a doubt, but to be able to go through it systematically with a partner and a support person to be able to, or a peer or whoever is part of that training, that trained individual to help walk you through the PAD so that it ultimately becomes an amazing document. And so I'd say probably we're a year away because we would really like to have it solid and then roll it out in the second year of our project. And then just start using them. Thank you.
Thank you, Kieran. Let's just wait for a moment and see if anybody would like to speak up and ask a question. Radio silence.
I have a question, Chris.
Yeah.
If I may. It's for Jonathan Martinez, who has been extensively working on this area in the area of intellectual and developmental disability. Jonathan, if I may ask you, how do we be careful that we're not changing one form for another? How do we make sure that the forms are not driving the choice and the discussion, but the choice and discretion is driving the way in which choices are conveyed?
Peter, I'm going to be very happy to answer your question, but I'd rather answer your last one about something we learned today, because I learned during this presentation, while Tristan was talking about how supported decision-making can empower people to regain or protect their rights, that a young woman from California who I am representing in a case who is trying to regain her rights is going to regain them. While we were talking, an agreement was reached where this young woman, because she uses supported decision-making, is going to be able to get out of her conservatorship. So Tristan, thank you for the very, very good karma. As to the question about forms, Laurie answered that really well because it's about people and it's about support. What we can't do is simply have a form that people are handed and told to fill out. What we should have, and what Laurie talks about so well and what Kieran just said, is we'll have a model and a process by which people can be a part of the process, drive the process so that their preferences, that person will drive the form and not vice versa. And that's yet one more reason why I'm just so proud to be part of this effort.
Thank you. More questions?
Don't see any out there right now. Perhaps if we don't have questions, we can have maybe some closing remarks from Ellen. I think it's been a really great group of presentations, hearing from some peers, wonderful advocates, mental health lawyer advocates, and we look forward to more work. We'll be hosting a larger symposium on May 5th, and we'll be sending out that information very soon. Ellen, do you have some closing remarks?
Just very briefly, I'm really glad that we all got together today and talked about all the things that we've talked about, the advantages of these documents and the range of things that can be included in it, and who gets to decide, and if there's a conflict, what do you do, and that kind of thing. I think it's just very very important conversation, and I'm really delighted that you all could come and participate, and I totally look forward to next steps and moving forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. I think that's a great place for us to finish. We're a few minutes early, so everybody can take a little Zoom break. Thank you, each and every one of you, for being here, and we can't wait to talk to you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks.